Something has entered the eastern Mediterranean that has not sailed those waters in nearly 3 years. And Tehran did not see it coming. Not because Iranian intelligence is blind, but because no one, not a single analyst in Washington, Paris, or Tel Aviv, predicted that Iran's own strikes would be the thing that finally forced Europe off the sidelines. What you are about to understand is not just a story about a French aircraft carrier. It is the story of how Iran, in the span of 5 chaotic days, managed to do what years of American diplomacy could not. It united the West, it activated Europe, and it handed its enemies a strategic gift that Tehran will spend the next decade paying for. We are going to walk through this, step by step, layer by layer, because the speed at which this crisis escalated deserves to be understood slowly. But first, let us go back to where it all collapsed, because it did not begin in the Mediterranean. It began in a strait 33 kilometers wide, where 21 million barrels of oil move every single day. The Strait of Hormuz is not a waterway. It is a pressure valve for the global economy. Every barrel of oil that fuels a power plant in Japan, every liquefied natural gas shipment that heats a home in Germany, every petrochemical input that keeps a plastics factory running in South Korea passes through that narrow corridor between Iran and Oman. The people who built the modern global economy understood this. That is why for 40 years, every American president from Reagan to Biden maintained a naval presence in the Persian Gulf, not to protect American oil. The United States is now largely energy independent, but to protect the valve. Because when the valve closes, the entire global economy feels it within 72 hours. Iran closed the valve. Not partially, not symbolically. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy moved fast attack craft into the strait's main shipping lanes and issued a direct threat, broadcast publicly by IRGC commanders, that no vessel of any flag would be permitted to transit without Iranian authorization. Ship tracking data confirmed what the statement implied. Commercial tanker traffic through Hormuz fell by 80% within 48 hours. 700 ships, oil tankers, LNG carriers, container vessels, bulk cargo ships dropped anchor and waited. The world's most critical maritime choke point became overnight the world's largest parking lot. And then, Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. Central Command, stepped in front of cameras and said something that has almost never been said publicly by an American military commander. He announced that the United States had destroyed 17 Iranian naval vessels, including the Fateh-class submarine, as part of an operation called Operation Epic Fury. 17 ships, including a submarine. The IRGC Navy, the force Tehran had spent a decade building specifically to threaten and harass Western vessels in the Gulf, had been largely neutralized in open water combat. That should have been the moment Iran recalculated. That should have been the moment cooler heads in the Supreme National Security Council looked at the wreckage of their Gulf naval doctrine and said, "Enough." They did not say enough. Instead, something happened that crossed a boundary that had not been crossed since 1986. A boundary that once crossed triggered the chain of events that sent the Charles de Gaulle into the Mediterranean. In the middle of the night on March 1st, just past midnight local time, an Iranian-manufactured Shahed 136 kamikaze drone struck the runway and vehicle depot of Royal Air Force Base Akrotiri in southern Cyprus. Akrotiri, a British sovereign base, European Union territory, NATO-adjacent soil. the first direct Iranian strike on British presence in Europe in nearly 4 decades. Cyprus President Nikos Christodoulides confirmed the strike publicly within hours. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemned it as a dangerous and indiscriminate attack. The RAF immediately scrambled F-35B jets, which intercepted and destroyed an additional Iranian drone over Jordanian airspace. An RAF Typhoon destroyed a second unmanned vehicle heading toward Qatar. The response was swift, professional, and clearly not enough to deter what Tehran was planning next. Put yourself in Emmanuel Macron's position at that moment. You were the president of the French Republic. You command Europe's only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. You have watched for 3 years as America bore the overwhelming burden of deterrence in the Middle East, while European leaders issued statements and attended summits. And now, an Iranian drone has struck a British base on European soil. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Global energy markets are in free fall. Oil has crossed $82 per barrel and is climbing. Qatar has suspended operations at Ras Laffan, the single largest liquefied natural gas production facility on Earth, meaning that 25% of the world's LNG supply has gone offline. Iraq has halted production at the Rumaila oil field, the second largest in the world, withdrawing 1.5 million barrels of daily supply from global markets. Lloyd's of London has suspended standard marine insurance for Gulf transits. The Cape of Good Hope route, adding 14 days and roughly $900,000 per voyage to every tanker journey, has become the only safe option. And you have an aircraft carrier sitting in the Baltic Sea, participating in a NATO exercise off the coast of Sweden. What do you do? Macron did not hesitate. On the evening of March 3rd, in a nationally televised address that caught most of his own defense ministry off guard by its directness, the French president announced that the Charles de Gaulle carrier strike group had been urgently redeployed from the Baltic and was heading for the eastern Mediterranean at full speed. This was not a routine patrol change. This was the most significant European naval mobilization since the Falklands War. The Charles de Gaulle is not a ship, it is a statement. 161 meters of nuclear-propelled sovereign intent, carrying 30 Rafale M fighter jets, the same aircraft that have demonstrated beyond visual range kill capability against every threat class Iran can deploy. Its accompanying battle group includes the Aquitaine-class air defense frigate Langade, with Aster 30 anti-aircraft missiles capable of intercepting both cruise missiles and short-range ballistic threats, replenishment vessels, attack submarines traveling beneath the surface, their presence unannounced and deliberately so. And here's the detail that the competitor channels will miss, the thing that makes this deployment strategically significant beyond its sheer firepower. Macron simultaneously announced the deployment of the Langade specifically in the context of France's December 2025 Strategic Partnership Agreement with Cyprus. That agreement was signed 6 months ago and received almost no international media attention. It was a quiet technical document about defense cooperation between Paris and Nicosia. But what it created, quietly, without fanfare, was a legal framework under which France could position military assets on and around European Union sovereign territory in the Eastern Mediterranean without requiring NATO consensus or American authorization. Macron used that framework with precision. The Langade would patrol Cypriot waters. The Charles de Gaulle would operate in international waters of the Eastern Mediterranean. France would be defending Europe, not attacking Iran, not supporting Israel, defending Europe. That legal and political distinction matters enormously. because it prevents Russia and China from characterizing the deployment as Western aggression, while simultaneously placing French naval air power within striking distance of Iranian assets across the region. France was not alone. Greece, watching these developments from Athens with the particular anxiety of a country that depends on Gulf energy imports for 31% of its electricity generation, moved quickly. Greek naval frigates were repositioned into the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. Hellenic airspace and port facilities were quietly made available to Allied forces. The Hellenic Air Force placed its F-16 Viper fleet on elevated readiness. Greece did not announce this publicly. It did not need to. The positioning spoke clearly enough to anyone reading the military satellite imagery. Now, let us talk about what Iran actually accomplished, because this is the part that should make Tehran's strategic planners lose sleep. Iran